Sounds good, man. Sounds good. And you made your way from saying Keloke to Wagwan
Wagwan.
to the US. What's up? How's it going?
Yeah.
I know you said you were born in Baltimore, but when did you make your way back here to the US? Was it for college? Today, we will discuss growing up in the DR and making your way to college in the United States, establishing a vision in life, and connecting that to your mission overall. And without further ado, I want to welcome Victor to the Friend Zone.
Thank you so much, Kojo. It's an honor to be here. For those who don't know, I've known Kojo since 2016. We had a lot of memories together in college, playing soccer, doing Oasis together, being in the same campus ministry, and we've just stayed friends since graduating. We call each other every week or every other week, and we've been able to stay in touch, which has been great. So Thank you for having me on the pod.
For sure, man. And you're the second person that I'm getting to shoot this live with in person. So it's definitely an honor to have you here. One of my great friends, and yeah, it's good to see that you can make it up here to Greensboro from Chapel Hill, especially considering that you're a pretty busy guy. You're going through the med school track, and pretty sure you had that long journey to even get to medicine. Where do you come from, bro? Like, if you can recall or give us, your trajectory here to the U.S., to Chapel Hill. Like, where did it all start, your interest in medicine?
Yeah, so to answer your first question of where I come from, I come from a lot of different places. So I moved a lot growing up, born in Maryland, lived there till about the age of 3 or 4, then moved to Swaziland in southern Africa with my family, lived there till about the age of 10, then moved to Jamaica, then the Dominican Republic, and I ended up finishing high school in the DR. My dad worked in global public health, so he was moving a lot for work. So that's what had us moving quite a bit. Finished up high school in the Dominican Republic, and then from there came to UNC for college. And that's obviously where we met. So yeah.
Yeah, man, you just bounced off like different popular vacation destinations for people here in the U.S. Swaziland, of course, is close to South Africa. A lot of people go do a study abroad or just go there for their first trip to Africa, not Swaziland, but South Africa specifically. Then you got the DR in Jamaica, but you actually lived in these countries. You actually immersed yourself in these cultures. What was that like? Were you able to learn some of the languages? I know DR, they speak Spanish. Jamaica, they got the patois.
Yeah.
Swaziland, I think they speak Zulu, maybe.
Swati. It's pretty close to Zulu, though. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, you're close.
Yeah. Were you able to learn some of those languages growing up in those places?
Yeah. Well, in the DR, I was able to learn Spanish. In Jamaica, I learned a bit of patois. I wouldn't say I was ever fluent or anything. And then in Swaziland, I was just really young, so it was hard to learn the language. And it's just so different from any other language that I was exposed to. I think it was a very positive experience overall, growing up in all these different places. You're exposed to people from all over the world. I went to international schools growing up, so we had people from all over, and it was kind of a normal thing to kind of be either an expat or your parents were from the embassy or missionaries or working for an NGO or something. So it was always kind of normal for me to be around people from all over the world, people who spoke different languages, had different cultures. But having said that, I did make an effort to kind of immerse myself in every country I was in. So in Swaziland, like I said, I was really young, but I do remember just a very rich culture, very rich history that they do a very good job of preserving. And my family loved it there. We still go back every now and then as we're able. And it was a great place to grow up. Jamaica, loved it too. Had a lot of great friends. Loved the culture. But living there was a lot different from what you described as kind of the touristy thing that a lot of people see and are used to. Culturally, I will say it was a little slower than here, and kind of more laid back, and people kind of take things at their own pace. But having said that, it was also very, I saw a lot of just very ambitious people who are very proud of their country and their culture, and where they come from, and who had kind of exported that to the world in a very public way. So I really appreciated that one thing about Jamaica, out of many things I could talk about. And then the DR, like there was that barrier of being in a country, not really knowing the language. So it was definitely very hard at first to kind of fit in and kind of find my way and find a sense of belonging there. But I felt like my friends and people in the school I was in were very, very welcoming and very receptive, and I was able to just be immersed, learn as much as I could, soak it all in. My family had a good time there. We were very well taken care of. But yeah, there were definitely challenges in the start, especially with a language and a culture that were so different from what we were used to. But we were able to navigate it very well in the end.
Sounds good, man. Sounds good. And you made your way from saying Keloke to Wagwan
Wagwan.
to the U.S. What's up? How's it going?
Yeah.
I know you said you were born in Baltimore, but when did you make your way back here to the U.S.? Was it for college?
Yeah, it was for college. I was 18. It was, even though I'd lived here before, it was definitely a culture shock, having been gone for so long and for most of my life at that point. And, not having family around or people that I knew very well was another barrier. So it kind of felt like I was starting from scratch, trying to make new friends, trying to establish myself in school, and kind of feel that sense of, like I mentioned earlier, belonging, identity, was definitely hard in the beginning. But I felt like, even though it was a challenge that I embraced and that I was very happy that I did. But I was also very grateful for, a lot of friends that I made along the way in college. I was very fortunate to have joined many different organizations and meet friends through that avenue, and still stay on track academically. And in the end, I thought my time in college was overall very, very positive, and a time that I look back on very fondly.
Yeah, that's wonderful to hear. Is that part of the reason why you're back, at Chapel Hill for medical school? Was it your undergrad influenced your decision to go there for medical school?
Yeah, there are quite a few influences. That was one of the big ones, already being familiar with Chapel Hill, with the university, with the city. And then also knowing people in the area. I did have a few classmates from undergrad who ended up going to med school at UNC. A lot of my community through my church, a lot of them were still around. So those are some of the big factors. And then, the major one that I don't really think I've shared with you was financial aid. UNC was very generous. I became an in-state student by the time I applied, and that was very helpful. And UNC was very generous with financial aid too, which was kind of the one thing that kind of tipped me over in the end.
For sure, for sure. I think whenever you're thinking about making a decision for post-grad, definitely look at the finances, because that debt accrues real quick, especially when you think about grad school, then professional school later. Definitely think about the debt. And if you can get some sort of financial aid where you don't have to pay back, a grant, scholarship, those definitely help in the long run. So, I'm glad that Chapel Hill was able to grant you that opportunity, save a few $1,000s, few $100,000, and be able to continue your education in such a prestigious university.
Yeah.
So you're still in here in North Carolina. Where do you think your vision lies as you get closer to the end of your med school career? Mm-hmm. Have you given that thought?
Yeah, I've given that quite a bit of thought, and we've talked about this many times before. But in terms of vision, like I've said before, I do have a vision, professionally, and then a vision personally. And, those two things don't necessarily have to be separate. I think those are artificial lines that we draw sometimes. But in terms of, my vision, generally speaking, in terms of where I want to live, I do think I want to leave North Carolina and then come back eventually later. So in terms of where I do go to train in the next few years, I'm not really sure, but I do have that desire to kind of leave for a little bit, see something else, see something different, maybe go to a big city, and then eventually come back, because I do feel at home in North Carolina now, and I do feel like a lot of my closest friends and a lot of people who I care about deeply are still in North Carolina, and I would want to come back eventually, but I do feel like this is kind of a time in my life where I do have the flexibility to go somewhere else, maybe see something different, explore a different way of life or a different pace of life, and then maybe come back later and settle down.
Yeah, no, that's a great perspective to have. And I think people our age, I'm starting to see more of that perspective, especially from people that grew up here in North Carolina for most of their lives, that have been here for a while. Case example, my roommate, he's talked various times about moving to a bigger city, such as Atlanta or possibly Austin, but he's from Chapel Hill originally. He wants to eventually come back and settle down in North Carolina. So just knowing that there's still time to go out there, explore, see what the world has to offer, but knowing where your roots align, or knowing where you feel more comfortable at settling down, and making room for that in the future is definitely part of his vision, and to see that with other people too.
Yeah.
Now, we're both people that have faith, have beliefs in Christianity, and I wanted to ask you, how does your faith also align with those personal and those career goals that you just mentioned?
Yeah, I think, first and foremost, trusting God is very important to me, and kind of submitting this whole vision and this whole process to Him. Because, I think it's very easy and very, very tempting for us to kind of go with what everybody else is doing, and kind of be influenced by the culture around us. And I think, just knowing that His voice is greater, and what He wants for me is greater than anything that I could want for myself, is something that I kind of have to remind myself of day in and day out. But yeah, just seeking Him first, and then like it says in Matthew 6, all these other things will be added onto you. That's been my perspective with my vision for my life and career, and other things that we've talked about, is just knowing that at the end of the day, He's Lord over my life and over what I want to do with my life, and it's just submitting that to Him.
Yeah, no, that's a great, I guess, perspective to have. Now, I know not everyone believes in the Christian faith or has a relationship with Christ or God, the God that we believe in, but I think having something greater than yourself to guide you in life is very important, and realizing that there's no sense of control that you can have over every single thing that happens in your life. There's other people that influence it, and there's a greater powers that be that have a say in that. So, there's things we can do to definitely influence our vision, but that vision ultimately comes beyond us. It comes from above us. And I know that's the case. But also us, we have a mission. We have things we can do to achieve our vision, or to figure out what our vision is. And for you, I know you're in school. That's part of your vision. Where do you think you align right now with your vision for school?
Yeah, for school, it's a good question, and I think having completed 3 years of medical school at this point, I've been able to see a lot of medicine, and especially taking care of patients and things that I want to do or not do in medicine in the future. So I am the kind of person who likes to think, and I do like to spend time with patients and have that time to just get to know them as people, and really care for them as people. So it kind of limited my options in a certain way. Like, I didn't want to do a specialty where I don't get the patient care, and I didn't want to do a specialty where I don't really get to think as much. So for me, I thought internal medicine was a good specialty to um, kind of compromise or kind of it's kind of the best of both worlds because you get a lot of patient care and time with patients, but you're also thinking and using your brain. And then within internal medicine, I feel like you have a lot of options to specialize further in something like cardiology, GI, infectious disease, or you can do primary care. So I think in internal medicine just opens a lot of doors to you, um, especially for me because there have been times in medical school where I've been unsure or I felt like I haven't had as much exposure to a particular field as I wanted to. But I think in internal medicine you have, like I said, the options to do a variety of things, but also spend time with patients. You can do procedures or not, and you can kind of tailor it in a lot of different ways that you're probably not able to do in some other specialties.
For sure. And I'm just wondering also, how do you feel like you came to that realization that internal medicine is where you want to what you want to pursue?
Yeah, so I came into medical school wanting to do infectious disease actually, and there's still a part of me that does want to do infectious disease. My dad was doing infectious disease epidemiology when I was growing up, so seeing how to help patients with HIV and malaria and TB in Africa, and that was kind of what I was exposed to growing up, and then I felt like growing up and seeing different epidemics and pandemics, with Ebola and more recently COVID, how infectious disease physicians get to be on the forefront, and a lot of people are relying on their knowledge and their expertise to deal with these pandemics and these epidemics. And then you have a lot of conditions like HIV that are chronic and that a lot of people are dealing with, and that might be stigmatized in the population. So that would allow me to work with underserved populations or populations that might be marginalized or stigmatized. Patients with HIV, TB. A lot of homeless populations have tuberculosis, and it's one of those conditions that a lot of people kind of stigmatize. It's one of those conditions that might be associated with a prison population too. And I felt like I could get the intellectual aspect, but also being on the front lines and working with underserved populations through infectious disease. But then, like, as I've explored medicine and seen other things that I've been interested in, I've noticed that in medicine, and specifically in internal medicine, there's just so much breadth of things that you can do and see. And I really liked my internal medicine rotation that I had a few months ago, and I felt like the people that I worked with were people I could see myself working with, or the kinds of people I could see myself working with in the future. And the kind of work we were doing was, it was very stimulating intellectually, but also very stimulating in terms of, patients presented in very complex ways, and we got to really help them and kind of see the results of our work. So yeah, all that to say, I felt like, internal medicine just was a great mix of a lot of the things I was looking for in medicine to begin with.
So you talked about how some of the attending physicians and maybe residents that you worked with also influenced your decision to pursue internal medicine. Right now, do you feel like your vision is still yet to change? Is it something that continues to evolve as you go on in life?
Yeah, I think it does continue to evolve. I think for me, what's less important is the specialty per se, or the title or the role. But I think what's more important is the values that you have, as well as your interests and your skills. So I think for me, I think internal medicine kind of fit me personality-wise, but also in terms of my interests and my skills. And for some people, it might be something else. And I think for me, it's as I've gotten older, I've realized that it's not just about your passion or what you're interested in. but also about what you can bring to the table in terms of knowledge and skills and experiences. And I felt like for me, all those things kind of came together, and that's kind of when I figured out, like, yeah, I could see myself doing this.
Great, great. And now let's take a step back because you mentioned your father, you mentioned his involvement in infectious diseases, epidemiology, and I'm thinking also about the places that you lived. You want to serve underserved populations. Do you feel like your childhood experiences also influenced that, like your locations, the countries that you lived in? Do you feel like that had a big effect on your perspective of IM?
Yeah, for sure. It definitely had a big influence on my view of just medicine as a whole. Seeing a lot of people who didn't have access to medical care, or conditions that were often stigmatized, like I mentioned, HIV and tuberculosis. I saw a lot of patients who were unfortunately dying from very treatable illnesses, like malaria growing up. And you see these things, and you come to the U.S. where there are still disparities, and there are still populations that are not given the care that they deserve. But I also saw a lot of opportunity to study or to learn about these conditions and the treatments available to them, so that hopefully I can impact care for patients who need it the most. And that's not to say that I want to necessarily go back to live in one of those countries, but I think those experiences growing up did open my eyes to a lot of the disparities, and honestly, things that we're blind to here. Yeah, if that answered your question.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great way to put it. But we both know you're more than just a physician or a future physician. You're also a human being, and you also have probably other visions for your life, or different parts of your vision that are beyond medicine. I know it's we talked about some of the struggles that we both have with coming up with our vision and making sure that we're sticking with it. How do you feel like you've been able to come up with a vision beyond medicine when, your primary focus now is becoming a doctor?
Yeah. That's a good question, and it's something that we've talked about at length in the past. And it's one of those things that I've kind of struggled with, if I'm being completely transparent, because in certain times in medical school, medicine can take up so much of your time and your energy and your effort, to where that one day off that you get, you're just kind of recovering from the week. So it makes it kind of difficult to really think about your vision for your life, or where you're headed and the direction that you have for your life. So for me, like I mentioned earlier, just submitting these things to God has been very helpful for me personally, in knowing that medicine isn't my whole life, but just one part of my life. And I have other parts of my life that are equally important or more important. Being a friend, being a roommate, I have all these different roles. And the question is, how can you be faithful to all these different roles, and all these different people in your life, and all these different commitments, while still doing well professionally. So how I do that, one way I do it is, I take a Sabbath every week. So one day out of the week, to just work on, or not work, but rest from work, and then do things that actually give me life outside of medicine. So whether that's playing soccer or watching soccer, or going to the gym, or spending time with friends, or calling friends I haven't spent time with in a while, or reading a good book, or cooking. These are things that I like to do and enjoy doing, and I've kind of made a commitment to setting aside that day, those 24 hours every week, to do those things. And then in terms of how I can be kind of accountable to myself. A few years ago, I made a mission statement for myself, and this kind of is a little different from your vision, but similar. And I was reading this book, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and the author talked about creating a mission statement for yourself and kind of reviewing it from time to time, and kind of using that mission statement kind of like a company uses it. What do we stand for? What do I stand for? What do I want to accomplish in these various roles and these various commitments that I have? So for me, I kind of divided it by my various roles. So, as a student, this is what I want to do. Be diligent, be excellent, all these kinds of things. As a brother, how can I be the best brother I can be to my 3 siblings? As a son, like, how can I honor my parents and love them and obey them in the best way that I can? So I found that very helpful in kind of looking at each of the different roles that you have, and then working back to see how can you be faithful in these various roles that you have for yourself, and that's been very helpful for me personally.
Wow. Okay. Now that's putting things into perspective even for myself. And I'll tell you why a little bit later, but I wanted to hit on a point that you just mentioned about there's a difference between a mission and a vision. What do you think that difference is?
So for me, I see a mission as this kind of overarching kind of goal that you have for yourself. And then I see a vision as sort of the steps that you're going to get to, or the steps that you're going to take to get to that ultimate mission. And I also see a vision as kind of what you see on the other side. Like, for example, for me, like in medicine, I did mention that I want to go into internal medicine, maybe specialize, maybe do primary care. But then I think the vision is kind of the steps that you're going to take to get there. And then the mission is this this overarching goal. So for me, the mission would be, as a Christian, submitting medicine, submitting my relationships, my hobbies, all that to God, and letting Him lead and letting Him kind of be Lord over those things. So I feel like, that was kind of me rambling a little bit, but I feel like the mission is this overarching goal, and then the vision is kind of the steps that you're going to take to get there.
Okay. So in this case, you submitting all your goals, your responsibilities, your roles to God, and having Him be the ultimate, I guess, steerer or person behind the wheel.
Right.
Would that be your mission?
Yes.
Okay, and then the individual roles, goals that you have, or responsibilities, those are the vision, or visions.
Visions, yeah.
Okay.
And I feel like a vision is a little more tangible to me personally than a mission, because I feel like a mission can sound a little abstract and kind of up in the clouds and not as relatable. But I think, a vision, like the example I just gave, like, how can I be the best brother that I can be to my brothers and sister? There's certain actions and certain habits and certain things that come with that that can be tangible. Whereas I think for a mission, I find it hard sometimes to see, how the day-to-day can relate to the overarching goal or mission that you have for yourself.
Yeah, I'm even thinking about when you look at organizations and you go to their About Us page, their mission tends to be a little bit shorter, maybe a more abstract, but then their vision tends to be a little bit lengthier, at least from what I recall. And I'm thinking that relates to what you're saying, where a vision is maybe more specified towards one area of your life that you're going towards, but ultimately it should lead to that mission, what you're known for, what legacy you want to leave.
Yeah.
And the reason I mentioned that I wanted to double back on this is because for me, I've realized that I've often had several visions, and I wanted to make sure that, from your understanding, that it's cool to have multiple visions. Oftentimes I think we think there's one vision and then there's one mission, and it seems like you can have multiple visions, but do they lead to your one mission? And I don't think I've always had multiple visions that have led to one mission. So that mission statement that you talked about having is something that I'm thinking about even applying to my life. How can I get the visions that I have in life to make sure that they're steering me towards my mission? Yeah, I think that's very important.
Yeah, and I did make this mission statement for myself. It's been a few years now. I think this was even before the pandemic. And the way I organized it was, I wrote the mission statement, and then kind of beneath that, I wrote, different actions or different attributes that I want in my various roles, which you could call visions that support that mission. So that's something that's been helpful for me. And right now I'm still working with what my mission is, and that's why I couldn't kind of say it very eloquently here. But as we're talking and as I'm processing, I do see how having a mission for yourself can add a lot of clarity into the various goals and visions that you aspire to.
Okay, yeah. And I think, having those multiple visions is, it's that guide to your mission. But for someone who's still working on what their mission is, what do you think are the first steps to connecting part of their vision or multiple parts of or multiple visions towards that mission? Or do they have to come up with that mission first?
So yeah, I'm obviously speaking not as an expert, but just based on personal experience. But I think in my experience, one thing that I've noticed has been helpful for me is just seeing where you're at, whether you're in school or in a job, or what are you spending most of your time on, and kind of starting from there. So if you're in a job, seeing how you can work on yourself and kind of grow through the process of working through that job, and maybe starting from there. I think, when it gets difficult is kind of like we're talking about earlier, like having this big idea or this abstract notion of what a mission is, but not really having something concrete to connect it to. So I think just starting with, your job or your school or your friendships, and seeing ways in which you can find growth in those different areas can kind of give you ideas on how you can start to make a mission. And even just seeing, if you're headed anywhere, like if you are making progress or seeing growth, or, what do you want to accomplish through this season in your life? Like those can be some kinds of questions that you can ask yourself to get to the ultimate destination of a mission.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that's great advice. I know we've talked about having stumbling blocks, though, when we're going along the way trying to pursue a vision that leads to our mission. Bro, like for you, how do you cope with those times where you stumble, you hit a pitfall, things like that?
Yeah, no, those times are very frequent, and I feel like there are multiple responses that you can get. Like either that stumbling block could be an opportunity for you to learn something about yourself that you didn't know before, or revise your vision, or I think what I've seen in my life is just kind of the latter, like revising or reviewing what your vision is for yourself, and maybe seeing if you need to make changes, or if not, then, just learning from the experience and taking it as you can. But I think the mission is something that I feel like should be kind of immune to those setbacks in a sense. Like I feel like, part of the reason it's taken me so much time and it's been so hard to make a mission statement or to see what my mission for my life is like, one, it comes from God for me, but also secondly, I feel like it's something that should be able to withstand those setbacks and those stumbling blocks, and still survive and still remain intact, even in the midst of the chaos and of life and the unpredictability of life.
Man, so that mission is definitely still evolving.
Yeah. So it's still evolving. I don't have it all figured out or kind of put together yet, but I think when I do have that, I feel like it has to be something that that can kind of overcome and still remain in the midst of these setbacks that you just mentioned. But like I said, or like you brought up earlier, like the mission doesn't have, once you have a mission, it doesn't have to be static. Like it can change and continue to evolve after you've found that mission.
For sure. Yeah. Now that clarifies things because I did mention vision not being static, or I think we came to that agreement on that.
Right.
But now we see that the mission also, can evolve too.
Yep.
And hey, he prefaced by saying he's not an expert now. But I think everything he said was eloquently said and very sound, very practical, applicable to life. Now, I know you have other parts of your vision that you're probably still working on, and it's up to you if you want to get into that. We haven't even talked about these things at length yet, but I know eventually, as we continue to grow in our relationship, it'll come up. But I know you probably want to be a future husband. You want to maybe even double back into your soccer aspirations. Maybe that's part of your vision.
Yeah.
But is there any other future aspects of your visions that you're working on right now? How are you shaping those if you want to get into those?
Yeah. No, thanks for bringing that up. But yeah, like you said before, like there's so many different visions that someone can have, and for me, I do eventually want to start a family. I do want to maintain hobbies outside of work. I do want to, remain involved and engaged in my church, and those are things that, for me, have kind of ebbed and flowed in different times of my life. Like I feel like now I'm not putting as much effort or energy into hobbies or into relationships or my church as I would like. But I think it's kind of a seasonal thing. Like there are times where I feel like you can invest more time and energy into certain things, and times where you have to kind of put them on the back burner for a little bit. So for me, for the last year, I guess, the last 12 months, I was, very focused on, school and being in the hospital and really learning medicine. And I kind of put a lot of those other things on the back burner. But that's not a permanent thing. That's just a temporary season of my life where I kind of made that decision to do that. So yeah, there are a lot of different visions and a lot of different goals that I have for myself and other goals that I'm kind of working through. But yeah, I think those things kind of do fluctuate depending on you and what you want to do in that phase of your life. And like we said, these are not static things or things that are kind of set in stone.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking for myself, the fact that I have multiple visions right now that may not align with what I believe a mission should be for myself doesn't necessarily mean that down the line they couldn't align with that mission. It just maybe shouldn't be the main focus. Just like you're finding out with going through this med school process and having different responsibilities and goals. I think, yeah, just understanding things can ebb and flow, and you can pick things up or start new things that work towards that overall mission that you have.
Right. Yeah, and I don't mean to say that, if you're, focusing on one thing like school, that you're necessarily taking away from everything else. But I do believe that, there is a possibility of kind of, instead of just feeling like it's a zero-sum game, like you have to, lose something to gain something. I feel like there can be a possibility where you can kind of make the pot bigger, and you can kind of put more into it, instead of feeling like you have to take out from it, if that makes sense. So like, to give an example, like, in medical school, a lot of people, both in medicine and outside of medicine, might think that, oh, for 4 years, like, you're just studying all the time, like everything else is second place, like you have no time for anything else. But I feel like, that can be a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, if you really want to study, 80 hours a week or whatever, like, you can make that happen, and like, you will find time or make time for that. But I think if you come in with an attitude of like, yes, like, it's going to be hard, like, yes, I'll have to study, but I also want to, spend time with friends. Yes, I want to volunteer doing this. Yes, I want to, have time for myself to do the things that I enjoy and the things that give me life. Then you will make time for those things. And that time is not necessarily being taken away from your study time, if that makes sense. So yeah, I think that's a temptation that I've noticed in myself and in a lot of people around me, to think that, if you invest in things outside of medicine, for example, then it takes away from medicine, when it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, so you got a big pot, got all these ingredients. Might start off with the pasta, which for you may be medicine, but then you have the seasoning, maybe the salt, your friendships, the pepper, your relationship with your church. Then you add a little bit of sauce, getting outside into nature, playing sports, things like that. Those still can lead you towards your mission. It's just maybe different quantities of each.
Right.
Well, Victor, I want to thank you for coming onto the Friend Zone.
Sure.
Is there anything else you want to leave the people with?
No, it's been a great pleasure and honor to just, be here and be live in person. It's been great. And yeah, thank you so much for everybody out there who supported the pod, and all the guests that you've had. Everything that I've seen has been just really top tier. So, it just speaks to, the kinds of people that you have in your life, and the kinds of people that you're surrounding yourself with. And, I just wanted to kind of admire that in you, and just kind of lift you up in that way. Those are definitely qualities I see in you. Like, the people that you have around you are definitely quality people. And, it's just an honor to be here and be on this pod. So thank you so much.
Hey, I appreciate those kind words. You're being too nice to me. But yes, this is Kojo, and this is
Victor.
And this is the Friend Zone. We're out.
Yes, sir. Peace.
Hello there. Well, I'm glad you made it this far. If you could, please leave a like, comment what you thought about this video, and share. It goes a long way. And if you'd like to remain in the Friend Zone, check out these videos. Peace.